This is I Watched It So You Don't Have to, Love is Blind, Season 6 edition. So let's start with a rundown of our singles. We have Amber Desiree, aka AD. She is hot, but insecure. Then there's the other Amber, who I'll call White Amber. We have Brittany, who is pretty southern and traditional. Amy, who seems really nice. Jessica, gorgeous. Gorgeous. Single mom. Laura, who is blonde and has big troublemaker, producer, plant energy. Sarah Ann, first impression, cute. And then Chelsea, who is a flight attendant. I'm starting with the women because honestly, they're who I care about the most. We have a usual Love is Blind drama, right? At the beginning, everyone is super excited about meeting their potential matches, and we have some kind of awkward moments early on in the pod. Someone who's highlighted as a source of those awkward moments is a guy named Matthew. He seems very logical, very analytical. I looked up his birthday. He's most likely a Capricorn. That would make sense. And he's basically there to get married, find a wife, and he's cutting straight to the chase. It's very off-putting for a lot of the girls who meet him initially, so he kind of rubs a lot of people the wrong way. He also sounds Midwestern, like Minnesota. Surprisingly, he immediately hits it off with AD. Now, yes, I am entirely basing that surprisingly off of stereotypes. He is a nerdy white man, and she is stacked, gorgeous black woman. But I'm not gonna lie, I could see it. AD also has a connection with a guy named Clay, who has big F-boy energy. She says herself that Clay is the type that she would normally go for, meanwhile Matthew is more so the safe choice. Now Amy starts bonding with Johnny, who seems like a cute little guy. They bond over their shared weeb status. They both fucking love Japan. Jessica, queen, bonds with Jimmy, who is quite literally just some guy. I'm gonna say I want Kylie Jenner to take Jessica's picture to her injector and say, I need you to dissolve all this shit until I look like this. Because Jessica has filler and she's 27, but the filler is sitting right, okay? Oh, and they also had their babies around the same time. That's interesting. Now, I want to note that Jessica warned Mr. Jimmy from the beginning that her past, her background, was a little bit full on. And Jessica decides that she's going to hold off on telling Jimmy about her kid until they've established a connection together, which honestly is fair. I get the people who say that she should have told him immediately, but I also understand where she's coming from. You don't want to end up with a weirdo who's she's got a 10-year-old at home, But in this first episode, Jessica does end up telling Jimmy that she has a 10-year-old daughter, even though she is only 28, which would have made her a teen mom. And to say that he doesn't take it well, he doesn't take it well. He basically says that he needs time to process, which is the man way of saying this has changed everything. This is speed dating after all, so Jimmy has also formed a connection with the flight attendant, Chelsea. I don't really have much else to say about her yet. Jimmy talks to Chelsea after his conversation with Jessica, and Chelsea ends up revealing that she had previously been married for 5 years. He once again does not take the news very well, and it's definitely compounded by the bomb that Jessica dropped on him earlier, but him and Chelsea kind of get into a fight, and she runs off crying. Now, Chelsea is also talking seriously to Trevor. My man. I want him to pick me up in one hand, like I'm a Barbie doll. That's all I want. Trevor has big himbo energy. He seems super easygoing and cool, but also he's really buff. He's also very understanding of Chelsea's news that she was previously married, and honestly, I feel like he would make a good partner. At least I hope, things always come out about these men as the season is airing. So, unfortunately, we have to return to Clay and H. Clay basically insinuates because he doesn't say it outright, that he would not be willing to propose to AD without knowing that he was attracted to her. This is a man on the television show Love is Blind. Is giving slight shake vibes with that one. Thankfully for AD, she doesn't do anything super pick-me-ish and go, oh, I'm super sexy and gorgeous, which she is. And she basically, and rightfully so, tells him that she finds that question, him trying to basically understand what she looks like, to be disrespectful of the process. It looks like the therapy is working because I feel like a past AD would have been like, oh no, yeah, I'm so sexy, I'm so hot. So that whole convo basically icks AD out on Clay, and she goes back to feeling like Matthew is her number one. Back with Matthew, AD ends up talking about how her dad passed away recently and she was never super close to him. This is right after Matthew had basically said that he wouldn't feel comfortable proposing to somebody without asking for their dad's hand in marriage. And AD is like, well, you don't have to worry about that with me because my dad is not, he's dead. And Matthew continues on his little spiel saying, we could leave right now. I'll take you out of here. Let's run away together. Like, if you want to go, I would go propose to you on a mountain, literally anywhere, anything. And AD is flattered, but she declined. The next day in the green room, AD is talking to White Amber. I don't know if I mentioned White Amber, but she's really pretty. And White Amber is telling her about how she had this amazing conversation with Matthew about how Matthew would not feel comfortable proposing without asking for her dad's hand in marriage. And he basically said that he would be willing to leave right then, leave the whole pod experiment with her right then, and go get engaged. AD is left speechless. And that is where the episode ends. Go to the next video in the series to hear about what happens in episode 2. Welcome to episode 2 of I Watched It So You Don't Have to, Love is Blind edition. We are talking about season 6, episode 2 of Love is Blind USA. So they left us on that cliffhanger with AD and White Amber, right? And we're not going to pick it back up. We're going to go talk about Jeremy. Jeremy we haven't been introduced to him yet, and he is ribbing Matthew along with Trevor. And it's interesting that they're having such a congenial conversation because basically Matthew is being billed as the Boo Radley of this season of Love is Blind. Now, Jeremy is into both Laura, the white girl with the big teeth, and Sarah Ann, the Wasian girl with the probably white dad. Besides a little introductory sting at the beginning, they barely show up in the rest of the episode, so you can forget about them for now. Now, I unfortunately see myself in AD, okay? I know for a fact that Mama has a water Venus, and how do I know that? Because I looked it up. She is a self-proclaimed fixaho who has a tendency to want to gather as much information as possible before making a decision or passing any judgment, especially when it comes to romantic relationships. Some people online have been saying that she's not a girl's girl for not immediately telling Amber that Matthew had similar conversations with the two of them, but I think she just wanted to hear Matthew's side of the situation and give him the benefit of the doubt. Honestly, I feel like AD is just a curious bitch, like me. She's a Scorpio. She just wants love. Give her a break. Well, AD goes in to question Matthew about the conversation that she just had with White Amber, and it goes about as well as you were expecting. He basically talks in circles the entire time and never answers any of the questions directly. But I'm gonna say something controversial. I'm gonna come out as a Matthew apologist, okay? Now, let's be clear, I was not always a Matthew apologist, but a friend of a friend actually knows him and has said that he's actually a really sweet and genuine guy who was genuinely just trying to find love and didn't understand that people were going on the show to just be famous. And I do honestly think that this is a case of the bad edit because the way that he talks in circles, it feels like it's manipulated by the editing. Notice how in those scenes, nothing he's saying makes any sense. It feels like he's just babbling. Also, they didn't roll the tape on his convo with Amber that was identical to the one that he had with AD. And even after the season 3 or season 4, whatever the fuck it was, reunion, they rolled the tape. They rolled the cuties footage, right? So where's the footage? I mean, it could end up being damning, but I honestly think that he's just a weird guy who doesn't know how to act on television, which most of us don't. So after his conversation with AD, Matthew is basically like, I'm going to be making my decision tomorrow, and AD is like, okay. She goes to talk to Clay, hoping to debrief the situation and get some sympathy or empathy or whatever for him, but he decides that the whole thing is about himself, which, who's surprised? He starts yelling at her for having a connection with another guy, once again, on the television show Love is Blind. And then he proceeds to be personally affronted that that other guy is Matthew specifically. Clay gives strong vibes of somebody who was not attractive until let's say late high school, and feels like his attractiveness is the only thing that he has to offer. And if a girl can have a connection with a guy who isn't as attractive as he is, then like, what chance does he stand of finding love? Which, once again, you were on the television show Love is Blind. Like, do you know what the entire premise of this shit is? Like, it's supposed to literally not be about looks. So the conversation becomes AD comforting Clay and letting him know that she was triggered by him yelling at her, but he kind of doesn't really get what he did wrong. And it's really sad to watch because she kind of like folds in on herself and you can see her, she's crying really bad and she's like avoiding the cameras as one would. And he's not even really understanding what is wrong with what he did in the moment. So they end up ending their date on those horrible terms, and AD goes back into the women's green room. And this is when she has the conversation with Amber about the situation with Matthew. And they're both really sad about the outcome, especially White Amber, because Matthew was her number one, basically, and she's feeling really lied to and manipulated by him. So at that moment, White Amber decides that it is time for her to bow out of the process and she's going to go home. Amy and Johnny are one of the sweeter couples from the pods. They give strong, like, Bliss and Zach vibes, and they talk about potentially having to be caregivers for Amy's younger brother. The convo goes really well, and it ultimately just brings them one step closer to engagement. Chelsea keeps talking to her guys. She has some really sweet moments with Trevor, but when she is in the pod with Jimmy, she ends up telling him that people often mistake her for the actress Megan Fox. Now, I will say this. I do kind of see the resemblance. But I feel like she looks like if you took Megan Fox's face and put it on Natalie Nunn's head, okay? But the Megan Fox thing really gets Jimmy. He's a dumbass. And from that point, it's basically over for Jessica. I'll also say that she says it like this. She goes, people always mistake me for, what's her name? MGK's wife, girlfriend? I don't know which it is. And then he's like, oh, Megan Fox? Babe, if anything, MGK is Megan Fox's girlfriend. Like, what are you talking about? So it's almost like she was trying to be coy and cute, not say it, but she said it. But Chelsea is also talking to Trevor, and honestly, I feel like their connection is so genuine and sweet. He has like strong bro vibes, but he also seems like weirdly mature, or at least like he's self-aware in a way that matters, not self-aware in a way that we will discuss very soon. So we go back to Jimmy and Jessica is trying to talk to Jimmy about how much she misses her daughter. But it almost feels like he's like forcing himself to engage in the conversation, like he's asking questions, but it doesn't really seem like it's hitting for him. I would say that this is the point where Jimmy should be honest with himself and say that he's not that into Jessica anymore and he doesn't see it going to engagement, but no, things continue. Finally, AD goes back into the pods to talk to Matthew. And she's honest with him that she still likes him, but like the whole thing with White Amber just really threw her off and made her feel like she was being manipulated. Let's get him closer, baby. And once again, Matthew gives this like really weirdly edited speech that is just like, it doesn't make sense to AD or to the viewers. And she ends up letting him know that White Amber has actually left already. And upon hearing that news, he realizes, well, I guess he was going there to tell her his decision. Regardless, his decision is that he wants to be with Amber. So he's going to leave the pod experiment and see if he can go and find her. So AD is left with Clay, which to her is the better option because he knew that he was into her from the beginning. But like honestly, somebody on YouTube said that going from Matthew to Clay is like dodging a bullet to get hit by a car, and yeah. Oh yeah, and somewhere in there Johnny and Amy got engaged. So they are getting ready to meet each other for the first time. And that's where the episode ends. So this is episode 3 of I Watched It So You Don't Have to, Love is Blind edition. And this is going to be the end of this makeup look because I'm honestly done with it. So we start this episode starting to see more of Laura, the blonde lady with the big teeth. And she's like describing her efforts to get a man, what she has tried over the past few years. Kay is in the men's green room crying about how he made AD feel horrible about herself for dating other men in a dating experiment. And then he goes into the pods to apologize to AD without really seeming to understand. It's almost like those people who think that self-awareness is the same as growth, right? You know why you're doing something, and so you think that that is the final step in the healing journey. No, babe, you need to learn how to stop doing it so that I don't feel like this ever again. Also, I don't know if I've talked about them yet because they haven't really generated a lot of drama, but there's also Brittany and Kenneth. Kenneth is a middle school principal, and Brittany is a former teacher, I think. They are 25 and 24, respectively. They're both feeling very ready for the commitment of marriage. Now, Brittany immediately red flagged me personally because in the first episode, she was talking about how she can't wait to be submissive to her husband. And Kenneth immediately red flagged me because he seemed to just go along with that shit as though it made complete sense. Well, in this episode, they get to know each other more and they end up finding out one another's ethnicities. And Brittany basically asks Kevin to confirm his race in the most, like, I don't see color, Southern white lady way possible. She's like, a random question. What's your ethnicity? And he's like, well, yeah, I'm black. Yeah. She's like, yeah, I figured that. So Brittany lets Kenneth know that she is white, and there's a little bit of an implication that there might be people in her family or in her life who are not as okay with interracial relationships. And also that might be something that Kenneth has to deal with too. But really, at the end of the day, it's giving that they like each other enough and they are willing to embrace this covenant that they've made with one another in these damn pods, and they will see it through if that's what they need to do. Very loving V Virginia, you know. And like honestly, I think it's cute. You know, she's a stand by your man, Tammy Wynette type. He personally I find to be cute. And they've both faced a lot of struggles and adversity in their lives. And I just think that they deserve happiness. And if that happiness is one another, then kudos to them. So they end up getting engaged in this episode, and that's really it. Now we see more of Jeremy, Laura, and Sarah Ann. Jeremy and Laura end up having a really sweet conversation about how they both kind of have trouble at the holidays. Jeremy's dad passed away when he was 19, and Laura's family just isn't super close. So neither of them grew up having very special, or well, neither of them have recently had very special holiday experiences. So they're kind of like future tripping about how they're going to celebrate holidays with their future kids. And on the other side, Sarah Ann ends up coming out as a conservative. Who was shocked? It wasn't me. One thing I will say about Miss Brittany, led by her husband, is at least I feel like if he tells her not to vote for Donald Trump, she won't do it. And that I can thank God for. Now, Jessica is falling more and more for Jimmy, which is really cute, but also kind of sad to watch because he just like is not in the same place as her, really. Like she's talking about like her ideal or typical night with her daughter, and he's on the other side of the pods, fucking like cracking his fingers and whatnot. Like, what? And Jimmy also calls himself a lover boy, and we find out that he's a Scorpio. So it's giving very Drake fan vibes, which is a red flag. Jessica ends up telling Jimmy that he is her number one and she is not really interested in going after anybody else, and he is just like not there yet. Then he goes to have a conversation with Chelsea and we see them start to get closer. Why exactly? I don't quite get. Now that once again could be an editing thing, but I don't really see what Chelsea and Jimmy see in one another. I do see what Chelsea and Trevor see in one another and what Jimmy and Jessica see in one another. But again, it feels like the kid thing was a deal breaker for Jimmy. So Trevor ends up going into the pods and basically telling Chelsea that she is his number one. And he ends up telling her that he is in love with her. And it's really sweet because he's so nervous and he's so cute about it. But Chelsea still has really strong feelings for Jimmy, so she goes back to the women's green room and is just like crying and in tears. She's like, Jimmy and Jeremy both really like me. I don't know what to do. I'm so sad. Oh. She's not Southern, but like whatever. And Jessica is just sitting there perched on the couch, like, Jimmy told you he really liked you, huh? Wish he'd told me that. And I'm at home watching, like, wow, you're crying because two men want you. Wish I had those problems. Actually, I don't wish I had those problems. I just wish I had Trevor. Send him over. Pack him up. I'll take him. And that is the end of the episode. This is I Watched It So You Don't Have To. Love is Blind, Season 6, Episode 4. This season is messy, y'all. So we begin episode 4 seeing Jeremy with an A continue to connect with both Sarah Ann and Laura. At the beginning of the episode, he is talking to Sarah Ann, and he basically makes it seem like he feels a more sexual connection with her, like they have more chemistry. But then we see his conversation with Laura, and it goes in a much more romantic direction. Clay proposes to AD, and she seems excited about it, but it just makes me sad to watch because they're talking a lot about how she's going to make him this better man, and he's going to become exactly the person that he always knew that he could be with her. And I'm like, Mama, what are you getting out of this? Is the answer nothing? Okay. Yep, yeah. I hope this goes well, child. Brittany and Kenneth meet for the first time, and Kenneth reveals in his like little talking head segment that he has actually never dated a white woman before. I don't know if I said this in the last video, but I feel like Brittany gave me slight Snow Bunny vibes, so I feel like she has had experience dating black men in particular, but for Kenneth, it is uncharted territory. Like in her talking head, Brittany gives a very like colorblind queen response, you know? So I definitely do feel like she's had experience dating outside of her race. So they meet, and it's sweet and cute and everything, but I don't know. I just got the feeling that Brittany, she might have dated black men before, but maybe not people like Kenneth's type, maybe more so Clay's type. Because at least from their initial meeting, he seems way more into her than she is into him, physically at least. They also have that covenant of God situation going on, so, you know, I feel like she's gonna stick it out, even if she's not quite feeling him type-wise. Trevor and Kelsey end up exchanging gifts. I keep calling Mama Kelsey. Her name is Chelsea. Chelsea gets him a bracelet that will vibrate whenever they're thinking of each other. So, like, he can press his N and she can press her N. And when it vibrates, they'll know that the other is thinking of them. And meanwhile, Trevor gets her a rock with the word love on it. He gives this very, like, corny speech about how he moved several times and the rock came with him. Regardless, it looks like she spent money on her present and he spent none on his. He also gives her his dog's collar. He had said in episode 1 that his dog's name is Chelsea. He feels like it's a sign that, like, Chelsea maybe sent Chelsea to him. So he gives her this, like, he shows her this thing that he brought with him from home as a keepsake. And, like, honestly, it's a really sweet moment because you can tell that he really fucking loves that dog. Back with Jessica and Jimmy, they are talking. You know, she has her gift for him, which is a letter that she wrote to her someday future husband. And if you are a reality television connoisseur like me, you know things that are meant for your future husband are a little bit cursed. Okay, Claire Crawley, we're looking at you. All right, the North remembers. But he ends up reading the letter, and it's like super sweet and heartfelt and touching, and then there's silence after. Jessica is basically like, well, what did you think? How did you feel about it? All of that stuff. And Jimmy's like, thanks. Kind of like in that 70s show when Donna tells Eric that she loves him and Eric is like, I love cake. And they get into a little argument because Jessica feels like she has been very clear with Jimmy about exactly how she feels about him and how she thinks that he is her number one. And she just is not getting that same vibe from him. It's not that she's not getting the same vibe, it's that she feels unclear about where he stands, and that's not like a familiar feeling for her. So they get into a little argument that Jimmy basically thinks boils down to Jessica wanting him to say I love you before he's ready, and Jessica being like, I don't need you to say I love you. I just need to like feel like I know that you could see marriage with me at the end of this. She says basically thus far I haven't gotten that sense. Like, I have no read, really. He tries to pull the classic how I feel about you should go without saying, which she thankfully shuts down immediately. She has really good boundaries, and she basically says, like, by the next time we speak, I'd like to know where this is going. Like, if you think that we are going to be getting married, if not, bye. Basically, Jessica knows that Jimmy also has Chelsea as an option, and so she wants to know if she is Jimmy's number one because Jimmy is her number one. She's completely unclear, can't get a read at all, which I think is just really uncomfortable for her. And Jimmy tries to calm her down by pretty much saying, like, you should feel fine. Like, I haven't told anybody else that they're my number one. I haven't given anyone else a gift. Like, I am treating both the girls that I'm interested in equally. But Jessica's still not having it. So Jimmy says that he does not want to tell anyone anything before he's ready, meaning he's not ready to say I love you to Jessica. Next scene, the same day, is his date with Chelsea. And what does he say to Chelsea? I love you. You know, like geometric proofs. This is the geometric proof of if he wanted to, he would. He tells Chelsea he loves her, and her reaction is basically, I feel like I'm gonna throw up. Which, if I was telling someone I love them, that's not exactly what I would want to hear. Both Jimmy and Chelsea have this similarity where they are more attracted to people when there is some sort of adversity attached to that attraction. Jimmy likes Chelsea at least in part because he knows that she's between him and Trevor. And Chelsea likes Jimmy at least in part because she knows that he's in between her and Jessica. They both want to be chosen, basically. Meanwhile, Trevor and Jessica are doing like the more healthy thing of being very clear about how they feel about someone from the outset. And honestly, I feel like they would both probably make better partners, like Trevor and Jessica, in the long run. They would both make better partners for Jimmy and Chelsea, respectively. But, like, honestly, neither Jimmy nor Chelsea seem mature enough to handle someone who is very clear about how they feel. And I think that they would both need a lot of coddling before they got to the place where they would be ready to be in the type of relationship that Jessica and Trevor both deserve. So Chelsea does not end up saying I love you back to Jimmy, which I think again is a point in her favor for him. But she does go back to the women's quarters and whisper to Laura, the messy white woman with the big teeth, that Jimmy told her that he loved her. So Laura is both a real one and a messy bitch who loves drama, because she immediately goes over to Jessica and is like, Jimmy is not your guy. You should leave now on your own terms. And Jessica wants more details from her. She's like, how do you know this? Is this a rumor? Like, what's going on? And Laura, not wanting to betray Chelsea's confidence, doesn't say it outright, but Jessica is able to, like, come to her own conclusions. She's then left crying with a bunch of the other girls from the pods rallying around her. And it's really sad, but also really sweet. AD and Clay meet, and, like, this is where the objectification of AD starts. He's clearly very happy that he has a hot fiance with a fat ass, which, sure. I don't know, it just makes me feel a little gross, but whatever. The next day, Jessica goes into the pods in her mother effing revenge dress to tell Jimmy off. She feels like he knew from earlier that she was not his number one, and he just withheld that information from her so she would keep chasing him. And he tries to defend himself, saying he didn't make his choice until after they got into that massive fight, which, again, red flag. You getting into one fight with someone is enough for them to be like, I don't want to date you anymore. And she says she feels like she was too much for him and he just didn't tell her. I feel like she has a point. Like, it was clear that the kid thing was a deal breaker for him, but he wanted to look like the good guy and just keep dating her regardless. And Jessica says her iconic line, which is, you are going to choke when you see what you missed out on. You're going to need your EpiPen to clear your airways when you see what you gave up. Which I don't think is just about her looks. Like, she's hot, but I think it's also, like, she's a good person. We end the episode with Chelsea being super excited that she's torn between Trevor and Jimmy. And she honestly gives me Eliza from Bachelor in Paradise vibes. Like, she's never been chosen before, and so she's more excited about having two guys interested in her than she is about either of the guys that are interested in her. So that is Season 6, Episode 4. Go to the next video to hear about Season 6, Episode 5. This is I Watched It So You Don't Have to, Love is Blind edition. We are on season 6, episode 5. I don't think we'll care about this episode because most of the people that I was intrigued by are already engaged, so we're just gonna speed through this. Chelsea breaks up with Trevor and gets engaged to Jimmy. People online said that she made the wrong choice, but I think she made the right one. And given recent information that we've received, we know she made the right one. Both her and Jimmy love people fighting over them. They both wanted to be chose, so they chose each other. I do wonder how the relationship will work out without the ghost third parties in the situation to create the adversity that fuels their desire, but I guess only time will tell. Trevor did make a kind of good point when she was breaking up with him that why would you choose someone who was between you and somebody else when you could have been with someone who knew it was you from the beginning, to which I say, because she's a Libra. Jeremy breaks up with Sarah Ann and decides that he's going to go with Laura, and Sarah Ann initially seems to take it pretty well. Jeremy and Laura end up getting engaged. When Jimmy and Chelsea are getting ready to meet, Jimmy ends up having a slip of the tongue and basically saying, I've never been more sure that Jessica is the one for me. Then he's like, wait, not Jessica, I meant Chelsea. He meets Chelsea and is like, well, she definitely lied to me about looking like Megan Fox. And I'm like, no, she didn't, guy. If he was expecting the sex pot from the fucking Transformers movies to walk out of that hallway and meet him, he is absolutely delusional. It really feels like Jimmy is not attracted to Chelsea, and it's sad because it's everyone can tell, including Chelsea. Jeremy and Laura meet up and they seem to have okay chemistry. The couples then go to Punta Cana, Dominican Republic for their quote-unquote honeymoons. Chelsea and Jimmy immediately start having awkward conversations about Jessica, and him bringing her up immediately gives very, I wonder what she looks like vibes. Especially since before Jessica left, she said, you're gonna choke when you see what you missed out on. He hasn't seen it, and I think he's already choking, babe. Which, honestly, I don't think is fair, because Chelsea is very beautiful. Chelsea also feels the, awkwardness and the weird conversations about Jessica mean that Jimmy is not as into her as she is into him. Amy and Johnny are super attracted to each other. They have a great physical connection, which I think is really cute, because they're the only wholesome couple on this whole season. The couple start to talk about physical intimacy. Kenneth and Brittany are going to wait for marriage. And Kenneth decides that he wants to start this kind of sweet tradition of nightly check-ins where they basically just go over how the day has gone for each of them before they go to bed each night. Laura is being kind of annoyed by Jeremy because he has very strong overgrown man-child vibes. So I don't know how well that's gonna go, but Jesus take the wheel. And that's pretty much it. This is I Watched It So You Don't Have to, Love is Blind, Season 6, Episode 6. So we are well and truly on these quote-unquote honeymoons. All of the couples have slept together or slept together. Kenneth and Brittany get massages, and it's a nice, sweet little bonding activity for them. Laura and Jeremy talk about the line between her playful nose and her serious nose. Because Laura is just generally a very no-nonsense person, and she just wants Jeremy to know that she's joking most of the time. AD and Clay end up getting personal over cocktails. So AD is a calorie counter. She's very conscious about her body. Basically, if it gives that she's a black woman and she knows that her attractiveness and worthiness is contingent on her being conventionally attractive. Thin, muscular, well-built, big butt, wide hips, small waist, all that. And so she does whatever she can to really support people seeing her as attractive, but also acknowledging her as a human being. There's a complicated thing in there about hypervisibility also leading to invisibility, but we don't have time to get into it. They start talking about what Clay would do if/when her body starts changing when they have kids. And he jokingly, quote unquote, says, I'd tell you to get your ass in the gym. And she's like, that's not a nice thing to say to someone. She's upset because he is being insensitive, and she's like, you can't really tell someone that they have to lose weight, and he tries to clarify that he's joking, but it really gives that if she gained more weight, or if she had come out fat, come out of the pod experiment fat, he would have been upset. And it eventually turns into a conversation about how AD has some really serious daddy issues and she doesn't feel like she deserves love. I honestly want my girl AD to run away fast and hard from this man. He's giving very fair weather partner, very Angela Bassett's husband in Waiting to Exhale. Will you leave your ass for a white woman after you build him up for years? Chelsea and Jimmy go to some cabanas and they end up talking about how they are not one another's normal type. He is the first blonde guy that Chelsea has ever dated. She says that she's generally more into muscular brunette guys, which, Trevor. He's like, wow, congratulations, Chelsea, you played yourself. We are going to a cocktail party where all the singles get to meet the other couples for the first time. Jimmy goes into it saying that he's really excited to meet AD, which is kind of sweet because he's like, I want to meet her because she was Chelsea's really good friend in the pods. But then it's immediately a red flag because he is like giving obsessed with AD. And the objectification of AD continues. While him and Chelsea are standing near AD, he looks at her and he's like, oh my god, wow, she is stacked. And Chelsea is clearly a little uncomfortable with that comment, but she tries to make light of it by asking AD how she got her ass like that. Mind you, Chelsea, and this is no shade, but she has the longest back of any of the girls who are engaged. And AD says, you know, it was just squats and Jesus, squats and Jesus. And then Jimmy goes over and starts talking to AD, and Chelsea is left at the bar looking alone and upset. And this is just probably an editing thing, but it seems like Jimmy is talking to any and everyone but Chelsea. Not to give a man credit, but like, I can see how Jimmy went into this thinking that it was just like a party for him to have fun with his friends and not like a meat market for him to be showing off how excited he is to be with his fiance. Like, this is the man who said, how I feel about you should go without saying. He's not really giving words of affirmation type of guy. It starts to seem like Jimmy is a little too into AD and not into Chelsea enough. And so she goes over to Amy and is basically like talking to her about how she's feeling. Jimmy comes over to check up on her and like see how she's doing, talk to her, and she doesn't really tell him how she feels. Which again makes sense. Like, she doesn't want to have a fight in front of all their friends in public. She'd rather have the conversation in private. But I can also see Jimmy being like, well, why didn't you tell me that you were upset when you were upset? Kenneth and AD end up having a very poignant discussion about race. And I think this season being in Charlotte, like, the people who joined are probably more open to having racial discussions than other seasons, especially like in a post-Trump Southern context, you know what I mean? So AD basically asks Kenneth if he thinks that Brittany has what it takes or like understands the magnitude of raising Black children in today's America. And she also asks him, like, are you ready to defend yourself? Because some people will see you out with a white woman and say, oh, he's a traitor, oh, he's this, oh, he's that. And he is very defensive of his connection with Brittany, not in like a how dare you way, but just in like a no, you know, I think she's got it, I think she gets it, and we're gonna talk about it more. Then there's this weird fight between like Jeremy, Laura, Clay, and AD about bean dip. Basically, Laura had jokingly said to Jeremy before the cocktail party with everyone, like, you should go up to AD and bean dip her. And Jeremy decided to bring it up in front of AD. And I guess bean dip is like when you slap someone in the tit. Look, I grew up around white people, but not those kinds of white people. So he says this in front of Clay, and Clay is like, you want to slap my fiance on the tit? Like, what's going on? And doesn't really get the joke. And then everyone is uncomfortable. Laura and AD talk after, and Laura is basically like, Clay made something out of nothing. Jeremy shouldn't have said anything. Like, she is blaming everyone but herself. But AD is like, you know, I mean, it's fair for Clay to be upset. Like, that's a weird thing to say to someone in front of their fiance. And Laura I'll just say accountability isn't her strong suit. I agree with Clay. I thought the whole bean dip thing was weird, and I feel like both Laura and Jeremy were kind of immature about the situation. So, back in their hotel room, Chelsea and Jimmy get into another fight. Chelsea is just really insecure and upset that AD, seemed to be the object of Jimmy's affections. So Chelsea is basically trying to say that she felt unloved, but Jimmy is not really hearing her. And I think that there has to be a line between defending yourself and not listening to the person who's talking to you. And Jimmy in general just seems to be a very defensive person, so I don't know if Chelsea's the one for him. She's incredibly sensitive, he's incredibly defensive. It's like a match made in hell. But they end the episode having resolved the fight and basically making up, which is nice. My assessment of Jimmy and Chelsea, now this might sound harsh. I don't think he likes her. I don't think he's attracted to her. And I think she needs to go to AD's therapist before she gets into another serious relationship. If they didn't end up getting married. Honestly, go anyway, mama. I think it could do you some good. But yes, that is season 6, episode 6 of Love is Blind. Season 6. I already said that. Alright friends, this is I Watched It So You Don't Have To, Love is Blind, Season 6 edition. We are on episode 7, which, in my opinion, is where things start to get weird. We start out with Brittany and Kenneth talking about Kenneth's conversation with AD, where he's basically just asking her, do you feel like you are prepared to raise black children? And Brittany, bless her heart, I think is trying her best to understand this new landscape of woke terminology. And she keeps saying I get AD's position. She's I identify as a black woman and I just want to make sure that the black man is feeling good. But I'm you don't identify as a black woman, you just are one. She basically says yeah, I think I can handle it. I think it'll be fine. And Kenneth is okay, if you say so. Then we go over to Laura and Jeremy. They are debriefing their fight from the night before about the fucking pig slop. What is it? Bean dip. Jeremy apologizes for the whole thing, but there's also a universe in which, Laura takes some accountability for telling him to do that and not being 100% clear. Kind of gave that she said it was a joke after it went down poorly, but it wasn't really a joke in the moment. She was no, go up to her and tell her about the bean dip. So Jeremy apologizes to her, but I don't know, man, there's something off about him. Next, we are with Amy and Johnny, and they are talking about how their relationship is basically going beautifully. And they're having that adorable couple issue where they're I wish we would just have a fight, because, if we're not fighting yet, it feels too good to be true. We need to just, have a disagreement so we can see one another in that arena. Which is fair. I've had some relationships where we never fought, and then when we did, it was over. However, we gotta, you're in love, you're soulmates. You're the only ones on this season who should actually be together. Shut up. And then we go over to Brittany and Ken, and they are not connecting. They're on a boat ride, and he is really fucking excited to see a dolphin, but he does not say anything to her outside of that. And you see her several times make attempts at conversation, try and say something to him, and honestly just look around is this awkward, or am I just reading too much into things? Next up, we go back to Clay and AD, and they are having lunch. Clay and AD are future tripping, talking about how cute they are going to be together and how excited they are to go back home. And AD talks to Clay about how she was a cheerleader for the Patriots during their winning Super Bowl run. It's also a little bit awkward because Clay is super into cleaning his plate and then cleaning up all the plates, stacking them up and organizing them. I mean, the man is a Virgo. I can't blame him. I can't say I'm surprised. The way AD's looking at him is kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy in my opinion. She's what are you doing? And I'm he's cleaning. I get it. Then Clay gets really quiet and contemplative, and he starts talking about how he's actually really nervous to go back to the real world because he's scared to let AD down. He doesn't want to disappoint her. He doesn't want their relationship to end up in divorce. He's just very terrified. They hold hands through it and they seem to come to a bit of a resolution. Then we go to another like lunch party with all the couples. They are at the beach having snacks at a buffet and just like chatting over cocktails. So Jimmy and Jeremy go over to apologize to AD for basically like objectifying her and if they made her feel uncomfortable. Laura ends up talking to Johnny about how him and Amy have not been like physically intimate together yet because Amy is on birth control. And this ends up being like a recurring thing in this set of episodes, and I'm just a little confused. I'm like, men can use birth control, right? But Johnny really doesn't want to have a baby before they're ready because he doesn't want their kids to have to like live in financial squalor. So it's something that's really on his mind. After apologizing to AD, Jeremy goes over to talk to Amy about Sarah Ann. Sarah Ann, the bitch that he broke up with. He's basically talking to Amy about how like the vibe between them was really nice and if he feels like they could be friends in the real world. To which I say, why? Amy really has Tiffany from whatever the fuck that season was energy. Like, people just come up to her and say things. And he's also talking about how he like feels bad for breaking her heart or whatever. I don't know. Jeremy is just like not it. Amy and Johnny talk more, and Amy basically tells Johnny, like, I would not be ready to get married if I did not have my father's blessing. Like, if he didn't think this was a good idea, I couldn't say yes to you at the altar. Which is sad, because, like, they're the most solid couple. But also, I get it. And that's pretty much the end of the honeymoons. Everybody ends up going back to Charlotte to like see one another's places and decide where they're going to start living. The first couple that we see in one another's space is Laura and Jeremy. Jeremy takes Laura to his super clean serial killer ass apartment. Now I don't just say it's serial killer-ish because it's super clean. Like, that's one thing. The hospital corners on the bed. Meanwhile, Clay doesn't even have a duvet. It's giving Patrick Bateman. Brittany and Ken go to Brittany's house, I think, and he's on his phone, like, trying to catch up on work or whatever the whole time, and she's, like, unpacking, and she's like, oh my god, I'm so excited that we're home, that we get to be together and start our lives together. Aren't you excited? And he's like, oh, in the phone. And again, she's, like, reaching out olive branches, trying to engage him, and he's just, like, not responding. And I remember hearing on a podcast, just between us, you should listen to it if you can, that the number one indicator of failed relationships is not incompatibility, it's not, like, fighting style, it's not love language, it's not any of that stuff that you would expect. It is failing to respond to your partner's attempts to reach out. So basically, if your partner says, oh, cool, look, a bird, and you don't respond, you don't have anything to say about the fucking bird, it's not really gonna work. Whereas if they're like, oh, cool, look, a bird, and you're like, oh my god, I love birds, or you say, oh wow, what a pretty bird, or you just notice that they're trying to engage you, that bodes a lot better for longevity of a relationship. So yeah, Brittany and Kenneth are doomed. And we end on Clay and AD at, I think, Clay's house. He owns a house. If I could stomach being in a red state that is not walkable, that you physically need a car to transit around, I might move to North Carolina. But I actually can't. I can't do any of that. But we end with a bit of a bang because Clay ends up telling AD that he has a lot of trauma around his parents' divorce, particularly because his dad used to take Clay with him on his infidelity trips. He would like be going to cheat on Clay's mom, and Clay was just there. And he never told his mom. Which, like, yeah, that's a weird position to put your fucking kid in. So Clay is talking about how he's never seen an example of a strong, like, functional black marriage, and that's part of why he's so anxious about this commitment with AD. And once again, AD's little, I can't wait to fix him, sparkle twinkles in her eye, and she's like, it's okay, babe. We got this. And that's basically where the episode ends. Go to the next part to find out what happens in episode 8. Welcome back to I Watch It So You Don't Have To, Love is Blind Season 6 edition. This is episode 8. Okay, so we actually start this episode at Clay's house. I just want to say, as soon as I saw the Guyanese flag in his apartment, he might have said this before, but I wasn't paying attention. As soon as I saw it, I said, yep, He's Caribbean. This explains everything. I don't know about Clay and AD. There's something. I don't know if AD is like me, which is that she's just like, her head is always in the air, or if she actually just doesn't like him. But there's something about the relationship that just doesn't feel right. It feels very forced almost. I don't know. I can't put my finger on it. Then Laura is with Jeremy at his apartment. He has gold silverware, which, red flag. A woman has been in that place. Ask yourself this. Which straight man do you know that buys gold silverware of his own accord? The answer is none, right? Brittany and Kenneth are at Kenneth's place, and Kenneth is once again on his phone. And Brittany is nicer than me because she's like, hi, bye. You gonna I don't know, get up off your phone at some point? And she's basically just like, I don't feel like you feel anything for me. She's like, I woke up this morning, I was super excited to see you, and you were just like, hey. And like, anytime I ask you a question, you're like, yeah. It's like one word answers. It's not easy to have conversation with him. It's getting weird. And Kenneth tries to defend himself by saying, I'm just like, I'm not going to have a big personality all the time. I'm not going to like always be so excited to like see you. Is that going to be okay with you? Brittany is like, yeah, I guess. But I know from experience, I dated a Virgo. As soon as they say I'm not always going to have a big personality, they don't like you. They might love you. They don't like you. It's like he was so excited to see her in the pods whenever they would talk. He was so excited when they met. And then now that they're together starting to cohabitate, he's being weird and like distant. It's really weird. Then Chelsea's girlfriends come over to her house. Jimmy is upstairs. These J names. Jimmy is upstairs working from home, and Chelsea and her friends are out like on the balcony like talking. And Chelsea is like, I really love him. I really care about him, but I just don't know if he's like that into me. She's complaining because he hasn't kissed her yet that day. And it's clear that she's triggered because this is also the first day that Jimmy ever got to see Jessica. So Chelsea's talking to her friends about how Jimmy saw Jessica, and she's now worried if he is second-guessing his choice. Then Jimmy comes downstairs to meet her friends, and it's nice. They, have a nice rapport. He's really sweet to them. It's cute. But the way that he frames the story of him and Jessica breaking up and him ending up choosing Chelsea is a little weird, because that's not what we saw and not how Chelsea understands it. He basically says that Jessica was his number one. And then they had that fight in episode 4 or whatever. And then when he went to go talk to Chelsea, she picked him up off the floor and was just like so nice to him. And that's how he knew that she was the one. So it's like he chose her because like in contrast to someone else and not because of herself. So Chelsea's insecurity is basically being exacerbated because she's like, are we on the same page? Did he just choose me because he had a fight with Jessica? What's going on? Next, we're back with Johnny and Amy, and they are pinpointing on the one big point of contention in their relationship, which is that Amy is not on birth control. Once again, I ask, do they know what a condom is? Do they know what a rubber is? Specifically Johnny. Does Johnny know what a rubber is? If not, the opportunity for a Trojan sponsorship is just like right there staring him in the face. Johnny does not want to have children before they are in a financial place to raise them comfortably because he grew up not so well off and he doesn't want that to happen to his kids. Amy is in the same place basically because she also grew up not so well off, but she's like, if we have a kid, I feel like it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. It also gets into the thing that, like, Johnny is more of a saver and Amy is more of a spender. She's like, you only have one life to live. Why spend it hoarding money? Which, that's my girl for real. That's my girl for real. Probably need to talk to someone about that, but we're not gonna go there. It's just a confusing fight for them to be having because hormonal birth control is so intense for people. Like, it's actually fucking with the chemicals in your body, whereas a rubber is a rubber. You put it on, you take it off. No baby. You put it on and you pull out. Extra no baby. So I don't understand why she would have to be on why she would have to go on a medication that would alter her body's hormones when there is an option that won't do that. It's like non-invasive. And if they're insisting on going the invasive route, as she suggests, he could get a vasectomy. Like if it's that serious, just do that. I honestly think that production kind of asked them to play that aspect up because they didn't really have any other conflict in their relationship. We go back to Kenneth and Brittany, and they are talking about how the night before Kenneth had come in at like 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever and woken Brittany up when she had to get up at 5 a.m. to go to work, I presume. And Brittany again is like, I don't know, there's just something missing. She basically says that she's not feeling that craving for him that she had when they were in the pods. Like, they've decided not to have sex before marriage, but there isn't even really a sexual chemistry between them. It's just kind of like they're roommates, basically. And almost as soon as she brings this problem up, Kenneth, like, latches onto it and is like, well, if you don't feel a craving for me, I feel a craving for you, but I can't force you, so we need to break up. And it's like, how did she, you can tell she is surprised. She's like, how did we get here? I thought this was something that we could work on. I wasn't saying that this was like the end all be all. They frame it in the editing as though it was the conversation with AD that like marked the point that changed him. But we don't know what clips came before that conversation and after that conversation. So I feel like he either was second guessing being in a long-term relationship with a white woman, is just like aromantic or asexual, but feels the need to get married to fulfill his family's expectations, or, as there has been chatter online, is gay. I don't know if I buy the gay angle, and there's a lot of like homophobia, particularly coming from Black women surrounding him, that makes me feel uncomfortable, but I'm just putting it out there. Regardless, Brittany and Kenneth end up breaking up, which was really a surprise to me. In the process of the breakup, he is utter trash. Like, he gets on his phone while she's crying. He doesn't go over to comfort her. He doesn't ask her how he's doing. They don't have any conversation. Like, this is not a person that I would want to be married to, personally. So honestly, Brittany, you didn't dodge a bullet. I think you dodged a Mack truck. Next, we're back with Jimmy and Chelsea. It feels like she has a tendency to project her insecurities into an issue that he is causing when really the problem is rooted in her insecurity. She says it's because he hasn't kissed her enough or told her that he loved her all day, and he's like, well, I was at work working. I do work from home, but I was at work working. And as a bitch who works from home and constantly gets calls from my family members, is like, hey, can you do this? I'm like, Mama, I am at work working. He also like tells her, I told you, I kissed you this many times. I told you I loved you this many times. Like, you told me that you want me to do this more, so I'm trying to, but it feels like you're not seeing that. But the real issue is the Jessica of it all. They're fighting about affection. The real problem is that she's insecure that he's seen Jessica. The fight escalates and Jimmy ends up telling Chelsea that he thinks she's clingy. That's clearly a trigger for her, sets her off. She starts crying. She says, I watched your fucking show with you. I hung out with you. Then I went upstairs and I had sex with you. And you want to call me clingy? And he's like, well, if you're talking about the sex, you initiated that and I could have taken a break from that too. Scorpio men. Like, if there is a sassy man Olympics, the gold medal is going to Scorpio men. So she gets upset. She's like, I'm going back to my apartment, whatever. And then Jimmy gets upset back and he actually goes to his apartment. Chelsea's on the couch crying. But then who makes an appearance? None other than Jessica. She's having drinks with Laura at a bar in Charlotte. And Jessica says that Jimmy basically friended her and then withdrew the friend request. Jimmy's saying that he hasn't been in contact with Jessica. Jessica is saying something else. And Laura also reveals that Sarah Ann sent Jeremy a DM basically asking if he's wavering in his decision and if he wants to meet up. And Jeremy liked the DM. So it seems like there's trouble in paradise for more than one of our engaged couples. Welcome back to I Watched It So You Don't Have to, Love is Blind edition. We are on season 6, episode 9. Johnny and Amy are adorable as ever, but we quickly shift over to Jimmy and Chelsea. Jimmy and Chelsea basically are able to resolve their issue from the night before. Chelsea says that she didn't like that Jimmy went to go sleep at his apartment. Jimmy says that he didn't like feeling like he was doing nothing for her when he's doing his best. And he told her not to stop initiating sex. Oh, we also learned at some point that he has a giant pee-pee. So, like, honestly, Chelsea, I see you. Next, we go to Laura and Jeremy, and they are meeting Laura's family. Laura's parents, her brother, and her sister-in-law come to meet Jeremy, basically. And they're asking them about the whole situation. Laura and Jeremy have that whole, like, playful banter thing where they say that they hate one another all the time and, like, that's their way of showing affection. And Laura's mom is like, they're not really, like, lovey with one another, but they seem to like each other well enough. Laura, true Virgo that she is, says that she made a pro-con list, and that's basically how she ended up going with Jeremy. Because there were, like, way more pros and barely any cons. Like, 2 cons, and one of them was his Hawaiian shirts. Then Amy and Johnny are practicing for their first dance, and I don't know if they're doing, like, salsa or bachata or, like, what the dance that they're doing is, because the music is, like, generic music, but it's really cute. So Clay and AD end up meeting Clay's mom and his sister. His sister is gorgeous. His mother is gorgeous. And his mom has very strong, like, familiar auntie vibes. Like, I feel like I know her, even though I don't know her. But Clay and AD get into it because AD is upset that Clay is basically always at work. He works nights at a nightclub. He works late into the night. So they basically just haven't really had the opportunity to see one another. And for some reason, they bring that up in front of his family. I don't know why exactly, but Clay basically, like, talks to her kind of spicy and is like, what's the issue? And AD is like, whoa. Which honestly, A plus for her. Sometimes I wouldn't even say whoa. I would just, like, shut down completely. So at least she acknowledged that the way that he was talking to her was inappropriate. Clay's mom ends up giving them some advice from, you know, an older auntie figure. She's like, you know, you gotta make time for what matters to you. You, AD, need to be more understanding about his work schedule, but also Clay, you need to make time for her if you say that she matters. Which is fair, balanced, whatever. Chelsea meets Jimmy's 2 best girlfriends who they seem like sweet women. I really, really get the vibe that he has either dated or slept with one of them before. But also Chelsea says that she has, like, no place to get mad because one of her best friends is also her ex-boyfriend. And they're talking about the problems, they're talking about their fight from the day before, and Chelsea ends up telling the girls that what's his name? Jimmy called her clingy. Jimmy's friends are like, he called you clingy? Jimmy is a stage 10 clinger. And they basically tell her, like, if you weren't always up under him, kissing him, asking him for affection, he would think that you hated him, because that's how he's been in all of his past relationships. So keep doing what you're doing, basically. Amy meets Johnny's family, and Johnny's family is so cute. His 2 sisters come. One of them is named Maria, which is adorable. It's just adorable. And Maria brings her fiance, I think. And they're just, like, so sweet. They all look exactly the same. Like, Jimmy and his 2 sisters have the same... Johnny and his 2 sisters have the same face. These white men are going to get me. And Johnny's sisters just absolutely love Amy. They're like, can you say yes now? Like, I feel ready to say yes to her. She's so sweet. I love her. It's really nice. Then we get to the tea. So back at Laura and Jeremy's house, there's something happening. Laura comes downstairs, she looks directly in the camera, so you know it's like a staged scene for them to have this conversation in person on camera. And they're, like, not talking. Jeremy is avoiding eye contact. He's looking down at his phone. He's got his sunglasses on. She's like, are you gonna keep your sunglasses on inside? What the hell is wrong with you? And she finally says, where the fuck were you last night? Where was he last night? Apparently, Jeremy went out at, like, 10 something with the guys from the pods and did not come back until 5 in the morning. Jeremy's story is that they had initially planned to go to one bar, and then as he was leaving, the location ended up changing. And the place where they ended up going was a bar that Sarah Ann happened to be at. He's like, well, I didn't want to completely change all my plans just because one person was going to be there, so I went anyway. And I saw her, and it was kind of awkward and whatever, but we ended up having a conversation. And then at the end of the night, we sat in my car in the parking lot at the bar and just, like, talked until 5 o'clock in the morning. Mind you, the bars in Charlotte close at 2 a.m. And he is adamantly claiming that he was in the parking lot of the Lost and Found bar. And Laura says, you were in the parking lot talking until 5 o'clock in the morning? And Laura is basically feeling like Jeremy is playing 2 sides. He told Laura last night, Sarah Ann's going to be at the bar. When Sarah Ann DM'd him, he told her, showed her the DM, all of that. And she's like, you're giving this information to me, but then you're not going the step further to say, no, I'm engaged and I'm firm in my choice. I don't want to cheat on my fiance with you. But Laura's like, why does Sarah Ann feel like it is okay to reach out to you on some, are you wavering in your choice? Do you want to hang out? Let's talk, chat, whatever. And mind you, this is the same day that Laura is supposed to meet Jeremy's mom. So Jeremy stayed out until 5 o'clock in the morning with another girl the night before his fiance was supposed to meet his mother. That's just very unserious of him. Laura is throwing him life jackets. She's like, where were you? Because you weren't in the parking lot of the bar. Like, well, I shared my location with you. You know where I was. She's like, how am I supposed to know where you were? I was asleep. I'm supposed to be checking your location at 5 o'clock in the morning. I don't want to be in a marriage where I feel like I need to check someone's location at 5 o'clock in the morning. And he says, well, I don't know what you want me to tell you because you have my location. You know where I was. And then she drops the bomb that she was in fact awake at 5 o'clock in the morning. And she did in fact check his location. And he was not in the parking lot of Lost and Found, which I have learned through other TikTok users does not even have a parking lot. And he was on the north end, which is where, whose place is? Sarah Ann. Scorpios always think they're so slick. But the thing is, they always miss something. You might have enough foresight to leave the phone in the car parked near the bar that you were at, but not enough foresight to turn your location services off on your Apple Watch. Yeah, lying liar who lies. He is a lying liar who lies. This is I Watched It So You Don't Have to, Love is Blind, Season 6, Episode 10. Didn't have the energy to do my makeup, did have the energy to drink wine. We open the episode with Jeremy and his mom going to the dog park to walk Jeremy's dog. If you will recall, last episode, Laura caught Jeremy behaving badly with Sarah Ann, basically, and she was not very happy about it. So Jeremy is breaking down the fallout of that situation with his mom. He tells her, she left. I've tried to get in contact with her. I tried to send her flowers. She doesn't want to hear anything from me, so she's just really mad at me. Maybe we can work on it, but I don't know. And his mom is like, well, you're lucky it wasn't me, because I would have your ass, you know? So Jeremy and Laura don't seem to be on good terms at this point, which fair, because he tried to play her like a violin, and she is not a violin. She's a human woman. Next up, we actually go to Jimmy's family. I think it looks like they're at a barbecue joint or something, meeting Chelsea for the first time. They give red hat with white letter energy, but it's sweet. Jimmy's parents have been married for 43 years. They really love each other, which is like such a beautiful thing to see. And they talk to Chelsea, they like her, they think she's cute, they think she's cool, and everything goes well with that. Then we go to Clay and AD, and Clay is getting ready to meet AD's mom. Well, actually, he's not getting ready to meet her mom. AD is getting ready to introduce her mom to Clay, because Clay is not there. Clay is at work. He ends up showing up. He has a nice connection with AD's mom. AD's mom seems like a really sweet person. And she seems also to be like AD in the fact that she really leads with giving people the benefit of the doubt and wanting to give people an opportunity, whether that's to her detriment or not. So she really likes Clay, she really connects with him, and she is supportive of their relationship. She keeps saying, that's a man, you got you a man, which, okay. There's not a universe in which I make this black woman feel bad for liking her daughter's fiance that she met on a television show. So we're just gonna move on. Next up, we have Amy and Johnny getting ready for Johnny to meet Amy's dad, which is super pivotal for their relationship. But it ends up going super well. Amy's dad is so sweet and he loves her so much. Like, I could cry thinking about it right now. He reminds me of my dad a lot, and it's just really nice. Amy had said earlier that if her dad did not give her his blessing for Johnny to marry her, then she would not be able to get married to him. And of course, he gives his blessing for Amy to marry Johnny, because Johnny seems like a kind, normal man who is just in love with his daughter. After the super sweet scene with Amy, Johnny, and Amy's dad, we of course have to go back to Chelsea. Chelsea and Jimmy. You gotta have contrast in television. They are having a nice moment out on their balcony, recapping basically what it was like for Chelsea to meet his parents. I don't know how this fight starts, but they
somehow start fighting about Jimmy going out all the time. I guess it's because at the lunch with his family, she had said that she really loved the life that he told her that he was hoping to lead. You know, staying home, sitting on the couch, hanging out, cooking together, all this stuff. Like, the way that he dreamed of his life with her was something that was ideal for her. And she's saying to him, you know, the life you told me that you like to lead has not been the same as the life that you have led while we've been out of the pod. Because apparently, I guess Jimmy's going out too much, which... And I understand her criticism comes from, like, a super insecure space, so I still have empathy and care for her. But this fight is so hard to watch because it literally starts out of nothing. It then escalates to Chelsea saying that one of the girls from the pod saw Jimmy out the last night and she was embarrassed because the girl was asking her, you know, your man's is out, why aren't you out? And then I guess Jessica was there too. It's unclear where Jessica comes in with this whole thing, but she's like, were you out with Jess? Were you out with Jess? No, he wasn't out with Jess, mama. And they're fighting also about the fact that he's constantly on the phone with his female friends. He's always texting them, he's always calling them, he hangs out with them, they're his friends. But she says that she would like him to... He kind of tricked her. He said, if you want me to take a step back from my relationships with my female friends, then just ask me and I can do that. And she said, I do, I've asked, but you don't listen. And he said, so do you want me to take a step back? She said, yes, I do. And he said, well, I'm not willing to do that. Baby, why'd you ask then? Why did you ask then? So he goes inside, she follows him inside, she's crying, she clearly wants to continue the fight, he clearly wants it to be over, he's brushing his teeth to go to bed. And then he says, I don't have physical relationships with these people, they're literally just my friends. And she gets mad because he apparently did have a physical relationship with one of his friends. I can see it from her perspective where she was like, you're not going to try and gaslight me and make me think that you've never been interested in this person on camera when off camera you told me that you guys had slept together in the past. But I think the point he's making is in the moment now, we do not have a physical relationship. I'm not interested in them in that way. It's not that he didn't say I never have been, but he said, I'm not interested in them in that way. He had told her this off camera as information for her to have and asked her to keep it to herself because he didn't want his friends who he had invited on the show to, I guess, have their personal lives out there like that. But then the first opportunity she gets to throw it in his face, she does. You can't win for losing, I guess. So Jimmy is clearly very affronted by this breach of his trust. But she makes it worse by basically telling him that she thinks that he doesn't love her as much as she loves him, and she thinks he's, not in as many words, but like insinuates that he's a liar, that if he wants to be out on the town all the time, she doesn't want to be married to him, all this stuff. And it's just a bad fight that didn't need to happen, where the problem was, once again, Chelsea is insecure and constantly comparing herself to other women, but she starts fights about things that are not about that. And then they escalate and become this huge thing about whether or not the relationship is working, when the truth is that she needs to work on the root, which is her insecurity. So then, back at Clay and AD's house, they end up signing their marriage certificate. They sign it, they're gonna file it later. And they have a conversation about what the relationship would look like. Basically, Clay is saying, I don't understand why we have to get married so quickly. Like, he's insinuating that he's not ready to get married. And AD is saying, well, I committed to this experiment that would say that marriage can work for us if we get married on this timeline. So I would like to get married on this timeline. And he's trying to say without saying that he does not want to get married. He also seems to not know what the hell a wedding is. She keeps having to explain the most basic things to him. But she ends up telling him that if she'd be fine emotionally if he said no at the altar. But if he said no, she would not be willing to continue to date him after that. And I guess that's information that he has now. After this, back to Jimmy and Chelsea. Basically, Jimmy tries to break up with her, but she won't let him. Which is like a thing that people with anxious attachment styles do, right? They will start a fight with someone based in their like delusional insecurity and then allow the fight to escalate to break up territory. And then when that person threatens to break up, they'll like beg them not to leave. And that's not an invective against having an anxious attachment style. That just is me saying, once again, Chelsea, call AD's therapist. But they don't break up, and then the next scene is the pool party where all the couples come back together. At this pool party, we learn that Laura and Jeremy have broken up. And Laura's really uncomfortable. She does not want to see this guy who broke her heart. Jeremy, however, is cool about it, probably because he spent that night at Sarah Ann's house. But the whole pool party is leading up to Jess getting there. Because Jimmy and Chelsea are on shaky ground. Jess is hot and coming. So they're basically trying to say, like, ooh, what's going to happen? But we will have to find out next episode. This is I Watched It So You Don't Have To, Love is Blind, Season 6, Episode 11. We are still at the post-pod meet and greet with all of our couples, right? So it's people who are in the pods, people who left the pods in couples, and people who left the pods without a partner. At the beginning of the episode, Trevor ends up having a conversation with Chelsea about how happy she is and how he's like, okay, great. It's not much there. Amy and Johnny are being a ball of adorableness, and Chelsea is next to, what's her fiance's name? Jimmy, while this is happening. And Chelsea makes a joke, and she's like, oh my god, shout out to the strongest couple here. And Jimmy takes it weirdly personally. He's like, how do you think that makes me feel, babe? Baby, I didn't think it would make you feel anything because it was not a serious comment. It was weird. Like, every fight that they get into is really weird. Laura and Jeremy end up having a conversation kind of like unpacking the end of their relationship. And I'm gonna be honest, Laura 100% ate Jeremy up. He's basically upset. Like, he was texting her, asking to send her flowers, trying to apologize, whatever, and she wasn't having any of it. And he was like, you said all these mean things to me. I know you need to make me feel good about myself. The thing that I love about Laura is that she's not going to give you a second chance to fuck her over. It's one and done. Like, one strike, you're out. And she also calls him out on trying to basically blame her for the end of the relationship, trying to turn it around on her, when he was the one who was doing something that was improper. She's saying, like, you can't say to me that this is over because you're upset at how I reacted when you were trying to manipulate me into forgiving you after you most likely cheated on me. And, like, putting it like that, it makes him sound kind of crazy, doesn't it? She calls him a fraud. She calls him a con artist. She says that she thinks that he was not in the process for the right reason. She's like, I came to this authentically myself. You're a con artist. He's like, no, I came into this with great intentions. And she's like, well, I don't fucking believe that. And he just sits there and takes it and gets ate the fuck up. Jeremy is a worm. Like, he makes me feel, watching him makes me feel so uncomfortable because I'm like, oh my god, she's right. This guy is a con artist. He's a fraud. Like, the way he's looking at her while she's talking to him, it really gives, she got my number. There's nothing else that I can manipulate out of this one, so let me just give up and move on. Another bitch getting ate the fuck up. AD ends up having a conversation with Sarah Ann about the whole situation. She's basically just asking some questions. So did you know that they were still engaged when you messaged Jeremy? Oh, you did know. You did know. Okay. So when you saw him out, did you know that they were still together? So you don't think it's a little wild for you to message a man who's still engaged if the door is still open? So Sarah Ann is basically saying, well, he insinuated, he told me, he made me feel like everything was gonna break off. And she's like, well, I didn't fight for him in the pods, and I should have. I just let him go, to Laura. And AD is basically trying to say, like, you inserted yourself into the relationship from the beginning and you never really gave it a chance to breathe, which is a foul thing to do, especially if you call Laura a friend, which when they parted ways in the pods, it seemed like they were still friendly, or at least like they considered one another to be friends. Sarah Ann is really coming at it from a, well, I wanted to, so I did perspective, which is very red hat, white lettering of her. 4 words, I won't say them. AD explicitly says, I'm not trying to interrogate you, and Sarah Ann is like, well, no, I feel like you're trying to interrogate me. And she gets all up in her feels and goes over to Jeremy and is crying, basically. I have literally nothing for her tears. In fact, I want to take her tears off her face and wipe my ass with them. That's what I have for her tears. You being a Republican, patriot, whatever is one thing. You being a shit person is another entirely. And I know that very oftentimes that Venn diagram is a circle. Don't fight me on it. In fact, if you want to fight me on it, fight me on it. I don't care. But like, never have I so clearly seen someone's political ideology be reflected in how they show up in the world and how they treat people around them. This is a person who you claimed was your friend, but not your friend enough for you to not go after her man while they were still engaged, just because you also had feelings for him. And you prioritize your feelings for him over the fact that he is fully engaged to this woman. Because you feel a sense of entitlement to him because you felt a way. And Jeremy's political opinions, or lack thereof, are also very present in how he shows up. Because he's really trying to play both sides. He's entertaining Sarah Ann while knowing that he's engaged to Laura. And then trying to play them off one another to see which one wins, I guess. America's a shit show. I don't know if we're going to survive this next election. Leave it to me to start, like, politically theorizing while I'm doing a review of what Love is Blind. Whatever. Let's keep going. Sarah Ann is sad. She's crying. Jeremy's like, oh, poor baby. You poor little baby. Do you want to go do something fun? Let's go get on jet skis. So they jet ski off into the sunset while Laura is, like, feeling actually sad because her engagement just fucking ended. The behavior is very scary. Like Tom Sandoval, Rachel Leviss levels of scary. Not levels of severe, because it's not that severe, but I'm like, oh, you don't care about people except yourself. Okay. Chelsea and Jimmy go do ice sculptures. He seems checked out. Oh, this is after the party, by the way. Amy and Johnny have yet another protracted conversation about fucking birth control, and it's literally like they had nothing else for them to have conflict over, so they just kept asking them about this. He found out that apparently a vasectomy, having invasive surgery to get your vas deferens snipped, is more involved than he thought. Which, like, yeah, it is. And then the girls and the guys go wedding dress and tux shopping. And I'm not gonna lie to you, seeing Clay with his friends, the energy is very unserious. That's not a man that's getting married in a few days. I'll just say that. Meanwhile, AD is with her friends, like, actually crying, actually really buying into it and taking it seriously. I don't know. Either she really went into this for the right reasons, or she is an Oscar-winning actress, because she seems to genuinely have convinced herself that she is in love with this man, genuinely be really excited to marry him, and genuinely be putting 100% into this process. Meanwhile, he's talking about his friends get with him when he first started getting girls, and are not going to be with him for the last girl that he ever got. I fucking hate Virgos. Amy and her mom literally make me want to cry. Her mom, once again, reminds me of my mom. Her family seems like an actually not dysfunctional version of my family. Is this what happens when generational curses are, like, plaguing you for eternity? But yeah, and Chelsea's sister and her friend are there, and she gets a dress. And yeah. And then all the couples have their final dates before their weddings. We end on Chelsea and Jimmy. I don't hate Chelsea, but I also don't think that she's ready to be married again. And I think she needs to accept that the common denominator in all her relationships that have fallen apart is her, and do some work on herself before marrying Jimmy. I don't think they're wrong for each other. I honestly don't even think they're that bad of a couple. It's just like we see all their dysfunction on screen. But yeah, I think Chelsea really needs help. And I hope in the years since they filmed that she has gotten it. That is a recap of Love is Blind Season 6, Episode 11. Go to my page to see the recap of Season 6, Episode 12, and find out which of these crazy kids ends up getting married. I'm sure you can figure it out. This is I Watched It So You Don't Have To. Love is Blind, Season 6, Episode 12. Cheers. It's almost over. We open with Chelsea and Jimmy's fireside chat. And once again, he sets her up to fail. Honestly, it's just funny to me at this point. He asks her, do you think that we should get married? Are you ready? Or would you say yes to me tomorrow? Like, whatever. That question. And she's like, I mean, yeah, we've gone through some stuff, but we've gotten through it. And I feel like going to the altar tomorrow, I'm 100% confident that you'd be a great husband, great dad. I'm gonna say yes. And Jimmy says, you know, I love you. I'm super confident that you're everything that I want in a wife, but I don't want to go to the altar. And this pisses Chelsea off. Not surprising. I think something that we discount a lot about Libras is their anger. They have a lot of anger issues. She's basically mad at him for like being honest and upfront and telling her that he's going to say that he would have said no if they went to the altar, but he does not want to go to the altar at all because he doesn't think that he would say yes. Which is fair because they are not ready to get married. She says, you know, I feel like you knew from day one that you were going to say no. You just wasted my time. I don't know that I agree, but I do think that he talked himself into loving her. Or at least into being attracted to her. This feels bad to say because these are real people, but I have to speak my truth. But Jimmy says that, like, the argument that they had where she told him that she didn't think he was in love with her and that that revealed that he had slept with one of his friends was what made him realize that he was not ready to marry her yet. And am I crazy for seeing his side of things? Like, am I crazy? Is he secretly, like, as manipulative as Jeremy, or is it just me? Because I get where he's coming from 98% of the time. She seriously betrayed his trust by revealing something that he said in confidence while the cameras were there filming. It seemed like she only did it out of a malicious need to throw it in his face. And then they're expected to just, like, get married the next week after that. Like, I don't trust you right now. Why would I marry you right now? I think what he's asking for is time to rebuild the trust, and then they'll get married at some point down the line. But she's taking it as a value judgment against her character. If he doesn't want to go to the altar with her, it's because she's a bad person and he hates her, which isn't what he's saying. But they leave that conversation. They're not going to go to the altar. So we're down to two couples, Clay and AD and Johnny and Amy. Clay and Johnny and AD and Amy are having their bachelorette parties the day before the wedding. Clay's two friends are there. Johnny's one friend, or I think his sister's fiance, I don't know exactly, is there. And then AD's girlfriends are there, and Amy's, I think, cousin and, like, her friends and family. Bachelorette's cute, fun, they have fun. There are 3 people out of the 4 who seem very ready to get married. Clay is not one of them. But the next day is Clay and AD's wedding. We go into extensive footage of the preparation of the wedding. AD is getting her hair done. She's getting her makeup done. She's crying with her friends and her mom. It's really sweet. We finally get to meet Clay's infamous dad, who brought him on his infidelity trips, and I need you to know that he looks exactly like what I thought he looked like. He acts exactly how I thought he would act. And Clay's dad kind of helps contextualize some of what Clay went through as a child. We learned that Clay's father's father wasn't present in his life, and so it was important to Clay's dad to always be there for his kid. But I think there has to be a line between being there for your child and literally taking them with you while you go cheat on their mom. I have no words. The way that men think and come to conclusions is so baffling. I don't think Clay's dad is aware of all the trauma that he passed on to Clay. And I hope that in watching this show, he starts to figure that out and, like, really actually work on it with his son. The likelihood. Like, AD keeps talking about how she's been going to therapy, she's been learning about herself. How long was Clay living with her? He didn't think, oh, let me join, like, oh, let me go. I find men exhausting. But yes, we get to the altar. AD is wearing her gorgeous dress. She's in her red bottoms, her bedazzled red bottoms. And she walks down the aisle and goes to Clay. You want to know what the first thing he says to her when she gets to him? Okay. Body. This woman is not a person to him, but we'll get into that later. Anyway, speech, they're both talking about how much they love each other. It's down to the hour of, do you take him to be your lawfully husband, AD? The priest or officiant or whoever asks. And she, of course, says, I do. Do you take her to be your lawfully wedded wife, Clay, the priest or officiant or whoever asks? And he says, you know, AD, I love you, but I'm not ready to say yes yet. Chelsea was the one crying about time wasted. Okay? Chelsea was talking to Jimmy like he knew from day one that he wasn't going to say yes to her. No, mama. The call is coming from the other house. He's literally thanking her for building him up and making him into the man that he's always wanted to be. And then says, no, I don't want to marry you. Well, if you don't want to marry her now, you probably knew earlier that she didn't want to marry her. And there was nothing that she could do to make you want to marry her because you are not ready to get married. Ergo, why go on a show where the end goal is to get married? I know it's like a quick turnaround or whatever. I know the timeline is very short, but I would have respected him a lot more if he had done what Jimmy did and let her know prior that he wasn't ready to get married, instead of fucking humiliating her in front of all of her friends and family. They're kikiing, they're talking about how much they love each other, how happy they are together, how they're so excited for this next step, whatever, and then he says no. Now here I am in this white dress with these red bottom shoes, this gorgeous hair, this beautiful veil, this beat face, looking like an idiot in front of my mama and my sister and all of my friends. Why? Because you couldn't be more transparent? I don't know if we've had this, but I don't remember us having someone go to the bridal suite and say, hey girl, look, I can't do this. I'm not going to make you walk down the aisle towards me in front of our people and tell you that, but I don't want to. So please forgive me, but this is over now. That could have been an interesting way to mix it up. Like if they said Jimmy already broke up with Chelsea, so we can't have any more breakups before they get to the altar. Mix it up by having him break up with her in the bridal suite or whatever. Anything for this gorgeous, classy, loving, sweet woman to not be humiliated. His dad comes up to him after the whole thing because AD has walked off. And he's like, well, you don't want to appear to be indifferent, so you should go talk to her. You don't want to appear to be indifferent. It's such a dark thing to say to someone. But Clay goes and talks to her. Yeah. What's the point, though? He said he wasn't deeply in love with her. So what's the point? Am I feeling triggered? Yes. Because I have ever dated a Virgo who knew that I was too good for them, yet refused to break up with me or let me break up with them, and wasted God knows how much time in my life because they knew that I was a prize and they didn't want to let go of me. We've been broken up for a year. They done sucked me completely dry. I'm living at home with my family. My dog is sleeping on the floor. Back hurts. My crop smoker. I'm kidding. I'm joking. But like, I see him. I know him. I don't like him. She was very clear with him prior. She would not feel comfortable dating him if he said no at the altar. So basically this is over. Hopefully. It's not. Clay's parents, though, have an excellent conversation about all the trauma that his dad caused for him. And his mom basically calls him out and is like, you had a good woman, but you didn't know what to do with her. It's looking like father, like son. She said, don't go to him, apologize for what you've done to him. Don't make excuses, just apologize, which is great. And I know, yeah, then Johnny and Amy get married, and it's really sweet. They say yes to each other, which of course they were going to because they're fucking soulmates. And I think, like, once every couple of years, a couple that was, like, meant to meet this way shows up on the show. And for this season, that's Johnny and Amy. But yes, that is season 6 of Love is Blind. You can go to my page for my predictions about the reunion, and follow me for more TV recaps just like this.